U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a wide-ranging speech today before the United Nations General Assembly. In it, he called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world.
The carbon footprint is a hoax. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. And I'm really good at predicting things, you know. They actually said during the campaign they had a hat, the best-selling hat. Trump was right about everything. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way, but it's true.
Should Trump's position on climate change dictate how this country proceeds with its climate agenda? Let's bring back the power panel. Emily Nicolas, Supriya Dwivedi, Peter MacKay, and Cheryl Oates. Supriya, I'll start with you on this one. Global warming, it's a hoax. I mean, we've heard the president talk about this before, but this seemed like another level when it comes to him denigrating the climate change fight, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs kind of nutty. His address was incredibly rambly. Most of his more recent appearances have been quite rambly, right? Think about his comments during Charlie Kirk's memorial or that weird presser about Tylenol yesterday, right? He's going down a different path. What's just generally amusing to me is that the comments were particularly ill-fitting, given that they totally undermined just the theme of the General Assembly, but also kind of crapped on multilateralism in general. And look, I think it's good to have Trump in these types of settings and to have him say these kinds of things because there is strength in numbers. Right, and what we've seen up until now from basically the entire world, save for maybe Narendra Modi, who has gone out of his way to snub Trump and to show and flex his own muscle, is that every other world leader, including our own, kind of just completely submits to him. So the quicker that countries, realize that they need to forge this sort of new path forward and, actually get a new path and not just, selling elbows up merch or whatever and talking about our security and intel partnerships needing to change, but actually doing it and not just tweaking at the margins, but really rejigging the system and doing it together with the rest of the world. We're all going to be beholden to the Mad King in the White House.
Yeah, Peter, some of the commentary now looks and seems a bit precious. Oh, will the U.S. meet its Paris climate targets under Trump? Well, probably not now when we're hearing him describe it in these terms, right? We can probably kiss that one goodbye. What do you make of what he said today?
Yeah, I mean, it was a howler of a speech, and it wasn't just climate that he was teeing off on. He was teeing off on the institution of the United Nations itself, and he had some harsh words for just about everybody. And unfortunately, there is a numbness, I think, that's falling over many. But the trouble is, he has so much influence, and America generally wields a very big stick. And it bleeds into all these different issues. He doesn't silo things. So we're into a big trade fight. We're very much, it seems, on the opposite side of this with respect to pursuit of green energy. I wish we were able to somehow get back to some real talk about real infrastructure, providing the world liquefied natural gas, for example, which would help many of these countries get off coal fire and get off other forms of dirty fuel. That's the type of substantive discussion I would like to see Canada having with the United States, and maybe a North American energy policy, for example. But look, it makes it very, very difficult to have these type of sensible, practical discussions when the President of the United States is so derisive and going after one sector of a very, very important energy discussion. Because, look, in the broader picture, energy is critically important to Canada's future. It's important to the Canada-U.S. relationship. And it's something that we as a country have to get our heads around. And so we're not going to be taking direction from the president, but we should be trying to talk to various people in the administration about how we come together around an important subject matter, mainly energy.
I'll just say Prime Minister Mark Carney was in the audience for the entirety of the president's remarks this morning, and we have up on our screen there a picture of the UN General Assembly because Mark Carney will be speaking there shortly. We'll bring that to you live. I think it's in the next 25 minutes or so stand by for that. But Cheryl, do these comments from the president do they undermine the whole global fight against climate change? I mean, now anyone who doesn't really want to take action on this file, they've got cover, right, from the president.
Well, I do think that President Trump's comments today do influence the way that the world talks about our need to address climate change. And, if he's signaling to the world that the U.S. is not going to make efforts to reduce its emissions, of course, there will be others who say, we're not going to, make those concessions. We're not going to change those programs, and we're not going to implement this stuff either. What I think is even more concerning about what we just saw from the president is that we have, if we hadn't already, we have completely jumped the shark in terms of political discourse, where you saw the president from the stage, cherry picking data from the 1980s about whether climate change is real. And we're not having a discussion about shared facts anymore. In fact, there are no shared facts. The president is cherry picking data where it's like saying, the first weather prediction was inaccurate, so rain doesn't exist. He's saying 40 years ago, the climate science was wrong, and so climate change doesn't exist. There are no shared facts anymore, and this isn't about what it was a decade ago in Paris, where we said, let's look at the best evidence and decide the best path forward for our countries and for the world. This is now completely driven by sound bites. And, President Trump knows how to make a headline. He knows how to get attention. And I think that's exactly what he's done today at the expense of many, many climate policies.
And he knows how to set the agenda, right? When he starts talking about immigration, then you start to see other Western countries then become consumed by that debate, right? He knows he has this innate ability to capture the zeitgeist and dictate what the agenda will be and to help others determine where they're going to fall in line on these issues, right? Emily, what do you make of this?
At this point, I think he's getting too rambly to be setting the agenda anymore. I'm really scared of what Donald Trump is doing in terms of domestic policy, cracking down on civil society and progressive voices in the U.S. since the death of Charlie Kirk. And the reason I'm scared is not because of Donald Trump, but because of Stephen Miller, who really is the mastermind in terms of what's happening on that front in the United States. We haven't seen that sort of mastermind behind Donald Trump dictate his presence at the United Nations. And so in terms of international policy, it's a free-for-all. And what it means is that the United Nations itself is not necessarily collapsing, but certainly there are cracks, and that starts with money. I think what I came out of this speech is that Donald Trump does not believe in his international institution. The fiscal year for the UN, the end date is for the U.S. budget is September 30th. Roughly over 1/5 of the UN budget globally was coming from the United States, and there's about really the majority of the U.S. fund to the UN is about to be cut or not going to be renewed as of next year. And so you're seeing 20% cut to the staff of the UN itself. You're seeing those cuts to World Health Organization and to other organizations who finance, obviously, world science. And so our ability to have our minds come together and actually be smarter that the Grandpa Simpson yelling at the cloud energy that Donald Trump sent at us today, that collective ability is actually shrinking, not because of the speech itself, but because the money is being pulled out. And so that is what is really concerning to me beyond the speech, which is really just the element of dazzle on top of it. And it concerns our ability to even have functioning international diplomacy. And so the question is, who else is going to step up? Because as we complain about Donald Trump, I don't see anybody clearly offering to step up, first of all, in terms of money. Yeah. The U.S. was a big part of the emergency response to Haiti. Port-au-Prince is still burning. What's going to happen with that? Is this something that we are even talk about anymore? And who else is stepping in? And so is Macron going to be stepping? There's this proverbial role of and it's very problematic, but still this expression, leader of the free world. So obviously the position is vacant now. Who else wants it? Because otherwise we're just saying that Donald Trump is gone, is gone. His mind is gone. But there is a vacuum of leadership. And when there is a vacuum of leadership, this is when really dangerous times start to emerge. And so I want to see people from around the world stepping up in that vacuum of leadership. I'm not seeing it so far.
All right, let's stay on the topic of Trump, but just switch gears a little bit. There's new polling that suggests Canadians have little faith that U.S. President Donald Trump would honor any trade deal once one is actually reached. According to Polera, 64% of Canadians say Trump would break a trade deal with Canada, while just 25% expect Trump will respect it. So, Priya, I'm actually surprised it's only 64.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm like, that doesn't sound so bad. It's pretty good for Trump. No, but speaking to the larger issue, I mean, there's clearly there's been, the relationship is on shaky ground, and Canadians are saying, even if you cut a deal with this guy, we don't trust he's going to follow it.
Yeah, there's been a real vibe shift from Trump 1.0 to Trump 2.0, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm surprised that only 64% don't actually believe the president. I would have figured that number to be higher given everything that's transpired. Like, the whole reason we have a renegotiated deal in the first place is because Trump wanted to tear up NAFTA to get to Kuzma, and now he wants something different again. So his word does mean absolutely nothing. I don't know why we pretend otherwise, or that there's some sort of grand Trumpian strategy at play here, because the only consistent strategy or ethos with this administration is that Trump can do whatever he wants and act like a king, and the entire political establishment in America just watches while he does this, and the rest of the world just sort of, falls in line and goes along. But I don't think Canadians should take the word of this president, and it's going to make things increasingly difficult for the Canadian government to get to a deal, because if we do get one, and we get a relatively good one, like a better one than we already currently have, I don't know how you sell that to a bunch of Canadians who don't even believe that this means anything to begin with.
Peter, are you worried about the rupture in the Canada-U.S. relationship, not just at the governmental level, but at the personal level? Like, we are seeing Canadians, the number going to the U.S., that is in free fall. They are pulling back on buying U.S. goods. The liquor's still off the shelves. They're buying more Canadian books and watching more Canadian programming. Like, they are increasingly hostile to the U.S. Anti-Americanism is probably at its highest point in a generation. Are you concerned about that and how things are playing out?
I'm absolutely concerned about that. I think many people are, if for no other reason than the economic impact that this will have on our country. Having said that, the unintended consequences are part of what you just said. Canadians are buying more goods. Prime Minister Carney's talking about Buy Canada, diversified trade. And all of that will take time. And let's be honest, we're never going to be able to totally replace the impact that the trade with America has on Canadians and our goodwill. But look, we do have to realize, sometimes hard to step back and say this is a moment in time. And we've had highs and lows in the Canada-U.S. relationship, though nothing like this in our recent history for sure. You'd have to maybe go back to the War of 1812. But we do, as a country, have to take this as motivation to continue to do some of the important things that we're doing. Pursuing a more independent defense policy, working with our colleagues. I mean, working in the Arctic, for example, with Nordic countries. I was just at a conference in Finland where that's something that's very high on their list, recognizing that we need to make more Canadian goods, more manufacturing. And certainly, I come back to the earlier topic of energy. We have to be able to get our energy, our oil and gas, to Tidewater, which is money we can reinvest in our own country for many things, including green energy. So it is an incentive, it is a moment in time, and it is a chance for Canada to become more independent, more able to do things on its own.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, the number is not shocking to me in how high it is. I think, it could be even higher. But I think if you asked Canadians the same question in a different way, which is, do you want Canada to just give up in that case? They would, for the most part, Canadians would say no. And so, of course, Canadians believe that Donald Trump is deeply untrustworthy and unpredictable. We have an agreement in place, and that doesn't seem to matter at the moment. So, they're distrusting of the process, they're distrusting of the outcome, and that forces the federal government to try to do two things at once. They can't give up on the process. Mark Carney has to keep fighting for a deal and has to keep fighting for the best position that Canada could possibly have. And at the same time, he's got to position Canada to not get a good deal. and reposition Canada to be, our own economic engine, to be more sovereign, to be more economically and energy secure. And those are two massive things to do at the same time. So that is the challenge of the government at the moment. And I think because of the position that Canadians find themselves in, and because of our, I have to say, I'm very proud to see the patriotism in that poll. Because of our patriotism, I think Canadians will give him a little space to do that.
Emily, quick final word to you.
If I have a quick final word, I would say that beyond the impact on Canadian economy and the trade deal, we also need to understand that what we just saw at the United Nations, how ludicrous it is also a threat to Canadian democracy as well. And that if civil liberties are under attack in the U.S., if science is under attack in the U.S., the way our universities are interlinked, the way our journalism sometimes can be interlinked, the way suddenly our media world and culture is interlinked, it's going to have consequences here. And I wish sometimes that beyond just the money, which is important, there's also issues of basic freedoms that can be under threat right now, and that we should also be devoting more time to our freedom of speech here in Canada, and how do we protect that? How do we make sure that we have platforms that are not owned by American billionaires close to the White House, on which we have our own public conversations? These are also pressing issues, as well as just trade deals and the economy.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you to the Power Panel, Emily Nicolas, Sapri Devetti, Peter McKay, and Cheryl Oates. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming on.